Hey there, I'm Felicia from Compass Land USA, your go-to resource for great deals on rural and vacant land. We have another land blog video to share with you today, looking at a couple actions you can take if your property is in a flood zone. So if you're feeling a bit lost after finding out that you have land in a flood zone, don't worry, your land still has use, and you can even try to get your property removed from the zone. So we're going to go over that removal process and how you can still make use of your land. Quick aside, why do flood zones affect you when investing in land? Because these are areas that are at high risk of flooding from nearby bodies of water, such as rivers, streams, and coastlines. These areas are designated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and are divided into different risk categories based on the likelihood of flooding. Flood zones and floodplains are related, but they're not the same. So flood zones are designated by FEMA and are based on, again, the risk of flooding, whereas floodplains are physical features of the landscape. A property may be located in a flood zone, but not in a floodplain, or rather, it may be located in a floodplain, but not in a flood zone. When investing in land, it's important to consider the flood zone because it can affect the value of the property and the cost of insuring it. Properties in high-risk flood zones might be more expensive to insure, and they may also be less desirable to potential buyers because of the risk of flooding. In addition, properties located in high-risk flood zones might be required to meet certain additional building and development standards to reduce the risk of damage from flooding. On the other hand, properties that are in low-risk flood zones may be more desirable and may command higher prices due to their lower flood risk. It's very much based on location, right? Like flood properties in a flood zone in Florida still have a ton of value. It's important to note that properties located in low-risk flood zones can still be affected by flooding, so it's always a good idea to do your research of the flood history of a property before making an investment. So what do you do if your land is in a flood zone? There are several steps you can take to protect your investment. The first one, obtain flood insurance. If your land is located in a high-risk flood zone, you may be required to purchase flood insurance to protect against potential future damages. Flood insurance can be expensive. I think it's around $700 a year, but it's an important protection against the potential financial losses that can result from flooding. You could also try considering flood-proofing measures. A couple of these might include elevating buildings, installing flood barriers, and using flood-resistant materials during construction. You also want to carefully review your development plan, and this might not be applicable to all landowners, but definitely if you're looking to build on your property, it's really important to consider the flood risk and take steps to minimize the risk of damage from flooding. So this might include picking a site on your property that's a bit higher ground, or designing the structures to be more resistant to flood damage. You also want to be monitoring flood conditions. It's really important to stay informed and take action if a flood warning is issued. And this again would probably include evacuation and definitely moving valuable items to higher ground. You can also work with local officials such as city planners and floodplain managers to try to figure out how to best protect your land from flood damage. It can be helpful to work with these guys to develop a plan and help you protect your investment. Or you can try to revise the flood zone designation. So you might now be thinking, well, I don't really want to go through and submit a LOMA, but my lot is in a flood zone. Can I still build on it? For sure you can. Look at Florida, right? Most of that's in a flood zone, and it's an extremely desirable state to live and vacation in. In these areas, there are often going to be certain restrictions and requirements that you must follow, and they'll vary depending on the location and the specific flood zone that your land is located in. So if you're considering building on land in a flood zone, here's a few things you can kind of check to make sure that your plans go ahead without issue. You're going to want to triangulate with your local building department or floodplain manager. So this means you're going to need to get any necessary permits, follow any specific building codes or regulations that apply to your area. You're going to probably need elevation certificates. And if you're in high-risk areas, you're going to need flood insurance. And again, I think that's around $700 a year. You can also try elevating before you build. Again, get your permits, get your dirt, do everything correctly so you don't have to go back and waste time and money fixing these errors. You can also try to incorporate more flood-resistant materials and techniques to help reduce the risk and damages from flooding. This can include things like waterproof sealants, installing flood vents, or building with more flood-resistant materials such as concrete or brick. It's important to note that building on land in a flood zone can be more expensive and time-consuming than building on land that's not in a flood zone. So it's always a good idea to consult with a professional, such as an engineer or a floodplain manager, to ensure that your building meets all necessary requirements and is safe and compliant. I hope you found this video helpful. As you can see, there are a couple different actions you can take if you have land in a flood zone, and of course the land is still usable and can be buildable as well. If you are looking to start your land buying journey, you can call or text us anytime, 313-349-0434. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That way you're the very first to know when a new property tour video is published. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.